Welcome to Puzzle Proof. Join us as we unravel today's captivating story and solve exciting puzzles together. Get ready to engage your mind. Let the journey start. Nero Wolfe and the Cipher That Killed. Chapter 1. A lady and a letter. I was 2/3 through a ham sandwich and halfway through a crossword when the doorbell buzzed. Fritz, bless his precise Teutonic soul, was in the kitchen experimenting with truffle reductions, so I took the bullet. I opened the door to find Trouble dressed in camel cashmere. She stood there like she'd been carved from doubt and privilege, early 30s, dark eyes that had seen too much, lips too tight for comfort. She held a cream-colored envelope in one gloved hand like it was ticking. "I need to see Mr. Wolfe," she said. "Don't we all?" I stepped back and let her in. "Archie Goodwin. I handle footwork and first impressions." "Diana Kent." She walked like she didn't want to make noise. "I was told Mr. Wolfe is particular." "That's one word. He's also allergic to exertion, human company before lunch, and women who wear too much perfume." She raised an eyebrow. "I'll try to underwhelm him." I buzzed the office. "He's seated," I told her, opening the heavy door that divided normal life from the Wolfe zone. "Come in and let's test your odds." Wolfe was, as always, anchored in his custom chair, brown eyes hooded and half-lidded with disinterest. He was nursing a bottle of beer like it had offended him slightly less than everything else in the world. "You are Miss Kent?" he asked. "Yes." She sat. "And I have a problem." "Let us hope it is neither mundane nor exaggerated," Wolfe muttered. "Proceed." She opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of ivory bond paper with 8 numbers typed neatly across the center. 74-16-33-88-21-09-50 that arrived in my mailbox yesterday. No note, no signature, just that. Wolfe didn't reach for it. He gestured me to collect and inspect. "Any clue what it means?" I asked. "None. But my sister was murdered 10 months ago." Well, that shifted the tone. Wolfe blinked. "Miss Kent, you omitted this context. I thought it would bias you, but I believe this is connected." I passed the note to Wolfe, who studied it like it might sprout a tulip. "I presume the police investigated her death. They said it was a robbery gone wrong, but nothing was stolen. I liked her less for that. She was hiding something, but I couldn't put my finger on it." "You suspect blackmail?" Wolfe asked. "I don't know, but someone is trying to rattle me or warn me." "And you wish to hire me?" "I want to know what that cipher means. And if someone intends to finish what they started with my sister." Wolfe sighed. "You understand my terms? A retainer of $300 paid now. Additional expenses to be invoiced." She handed over a check before he finished. Wolfe grunted approval. "I'll begin by analyzing this sequence. Mr. Goodwin will interview you further and review your sister's file." Her name was Julia Kent. She was a research assistant at a pharmaceutical firm. Biocor? That caught Wolfe's attention like a bell toll in an empty church. "Biocor," he said. "Mr. Goodwin, escort Miss Kent to the front. You'll visit Biocor tomorrow." "Sure," I said, assuming they let me pass the coat rack. When I walked her out, she turned on the stoop and gave me a look. "There's something wrong," she said. "Something deeper than just a note." "I don't know what, but I can feel it." I didn't say anything. Wolfe doesn't like us promising outcomes, but my gut was already grinding. She disappeared into a black town car. I watched it vanish down the street. Back upstairs, Wolfe hadn't moved. "There is something peculiar about that sequence," he murmured. Yeah? It's not random, it's structured, but not obviously coded. Well, the good news is, I said, you've got a mystery and a client before lunch. That's got to be a record. Wolfe scowled. Pfui! Chapter 2. The Lab and the Lie. The next morning, I was up with the dawn, which for the record is not a habit I encourage. But when Nero Wolfe sends you sniffing around a pharmaceutical company with more patents than the Vatican's got secrets, you don't take your sweet time. BioCore's Midtown offices were designed to intimidate: steel glass, polished marble, and a receptionist who looked like she could swat subpoenas with a glance. Archie Goodwin, I said with my friendliest voice. I'm looking into a private matter involving a former employee, Julia Kent. I'd like to speak to whoever handled her exit paperwork. The receptionist, a frost queen in horn rims, clicked her mouse like it owed her money. Julia Kent died last year. Very observant. I'm not from human resources. She gave me the look women reserve for men who quote noir movies at cocktail bars. One moment, 2 phone calls and a side glance later, I was escorted by a junior executive in a fitted blazer who introduced herself as Carrie Stroud, communications liaison, which sounded like a job invented to intercept questions like mine. We were devastated by Julia's death, Carrie said as we walked through the lab corridor. She was bright, precise, kept to herself, but everyone respected her work. Any idea if she had enemies? Carrie's forehead creased, like I'd just asked if Julia was a Russian spy. Here, number they're not even in R&D, and believe me, that's where the claws usually come out. The lab was glass-walled, immaculate, and silent as a submarine. People in coats moved with clinical precision, pipettes in hand. Nothing screamed murder mystery, but that's the thing about corpses, they rarely announce themselves. I made notes. Carrie led me to a small conference room and slid a slim file across the table. This is all we retained from her employment records. Some forms, lab schedules, a couple of email printouts. I flipped through them, slow and deliberate. The schedule was tight, full of late-night lab access, often solo. One email from Julia to someone named Dr. Meyer read, I don't think we should bury this. If something happens, I want it on record. Well now, I tapped the name. Dr. Meyer still around? Carrie hesitated. He left last quarter, early retirement. I'd like his number. She blinked. That's confidential. So's what I had for breakfast, but here we are. Carrie gave me a level look. You can request it through legal? I smiled. We'll see if that's necessary. After thanking her with the sincerity of a man offered a single peanut for dinner, I left the building and dialed Wolfe. Well? He asked, without greeting. She had access to the lab at odd hours, sent a spicy little email to a doctor, Meyer about not burying something, and the whole place smells like antiseptic and suppression. Curious, Wolfe muttered. Did you secure a copy of the file? Yep. And I'll drop it off with Fritz before heading out again. Good. I may require a full review of BioCore's recent patents. That'll be a party. Back at the brownstone, I handed the file over and poured myself coffee. Wolfe barely glanced at me from behind his desk. His fingers were already tapping out the cipher on paper like a concert pianist, flirting with Rachmaninoff. That sequence, he said, it's not a code, it's a pattern. Enlighten me. They're lot numbers, drug manufacturing lot numbers. I cross-checked them in the FDA's online database while you were gallivanting. Efficient. Thank you. Lot 74 was tied to a painkiller prototype called Medirex, Lot 16 to an anti-anxiety formula, and so on, all experimental, all quietly discontinued. That screams cover-up. Indeed, someone sent Miss Kent a record of failed or aborted trials, likely connected to her sister's research. And now Julia's dead. Yes. I was about to add a wisecrack when the phone rang. Fritz answered, then called up, "It's the police, Mr. Goodwin, Inspector Kramer." I sighed and took the line. "Goodwin," Kramer barked, "you've been sniffing around BioCore?" "Nice to hear your voice too, Inspector." "Don't play games." Julia Kent's name came up in a new mess. Dr. Samuel Meyer was found dead this morning in his apartment. That cracked my posture. Dead? Gunshot to the head, no weapon recovered. Looks like murder. I held the phone away a second and gave Wolfe a look that said, "Brace yourself." "He was Julia's supervisor," I said. "She flagged something to him." "Well, whatever it was, it's buried now, and if I find out you and your orchid-loving boss are sitting on evidence, you'll what, revoke our gardening licenses?" He hung up with his usual delicacy. Wolfe was silent. "Murder number 2, I said. "Yes," Wolfe replied grimly. "And more troubling, he was likely the intended link to whoever sent that cipher. We must act before another body appears." I gathered my coat. "You have an appointment," Wolfe said. "Miss Diana Kent will return at 4. Ask her why she really came to us. She's withholding something." I nodded. "With pleasure." At 4:02 p.m. sharp, Diana Kent stepped back into the office. Her coat was dark this time, her face unreadable. Wolfe didn't offer pleasantries. "Miss Kent, we've discovered that your sister was involved in confidential drug research. Her supervisor, Dr. Meyer, is dead as of this morning. Murdered." Diana's eyes widened. "Oh my God!" "Indeed. Did you know she'd been working alone in the labs after hours?" "No." "You're lying," Wolfe said, flat and cold. She stared, then broke. "Julia called me once. She said she'd found something that could hurt the company. She wouldn't say more, just that she was scared." "Why didn't you tell us this yesterday?" "Because I thought it made her sound paranoid, and maybe she was, but now—" Wolfe leaned back. "Miss Kent, someone is killing to suppress a truth your sister died trying to expose. We'll uncover it, but you must remain absolutely honest from this point on. Do you understand?" She nodded, pale. I showed her out. When I returned, Wolfe had risen, miracle of miracles, from his chair. He stood by the globe near the bookshelves, hand resting on it like Caesar surveying Gaul. "We are closer than they think, Archie." "Closer to what?" He turned. "To a conspiracy of fatal proportions." Chapter 3. The Man in the Grey Sedan. By noon the next day, I'd seen enough of pharmaceutical corridors to last me a lifetime, and I still hadn't landed a single lead that didn't feel like it was coated in Teflon. Wolfe was decoding lot numbers like a savant, but we still didn't know who sent the cipher or why Dr. Meyer had been conveniently erased. So I did what I do best, hit the pavement. Julia Kent had a roommate before she died. Wolfe, with all the enthusiasm of a man allergic to sunshine, had passed me a slip of paper with her name scribbled in that neat, fat script of his, Lana Morse, registered nurse. I called ahead, told her I was following up on legal loose ends. Technically true. Wolfe's version of legality is a bit elastic when he smells a puzzle worth solving. Lana lived in a brownstone in Harlem, 2nd floor. Modest but tidy. When she opened the door, she looked like she hadn't slept since Nixon resigned. Big hazel eyes, soft jaw, and a voice that came out half-wrapped in regret. "Julia's case again?" she said. "You're the second one this week." "Second?" She opened the door wider. "A man showed up 2 nights ago, said he was a private investigator. I didn't buy it." "Description?" "Tall, 40-ish, grey suit, grey car. He kept asking if Julia kept a journal." That rang a bell, hard. "Did she?" I asked. Lana hesitated. "Yeah, but it vanished the day after she died. I thought the police had it." "They didn't." She rubbed her arms. "Look, Julia was scared before she died. She said something about a trial protocol being pushed through too fast. When I asked if she meant the company, she just said, They don't care who gets hurt. That was the last time we talked. You report that to anyone? Only to her sister, Diana. Interesting. Diana hadn't mentioned that part. She was holding back more than just emotion. I thanked Lana, left her my number, and walked out to the curb. And that's when I saw it. A grey sedan parked across the street, engine off, but the silhouette behind the wheel unmistakable. Someone was tailing me. I ducked into the deli on the corner, cut through the back, and came out the alley behind the building. When I circled around, the sedan was still there. The driver, white male, grizzled jaw, cheap sunglasses, pretended to be reading a newspaper that didn't match the weather. I walked up and rapped on the window. "Nice day to stalk a stranger," I said. He didn't flinch, just started the engine and drove off. I memorized the plate NYH5023. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was elbow deep in his orchids. The room smelled like humid heaven and unreasonable demands. "You were followed," he said, without turning. "You psychic now?" "You were gone longer than expected. Your voice is tight." "And you brought your notebook into the plant room, which you never do." "Fair point." I handed him the notes. "Julia kept a journal. It's missing. A man in a grey sedan asked about it 2 days ago. He tailed me this morning." "License plate?" "NYH5023. Wolfe nodded once. "I'll have Saul check it." Saul Panzer is our human bloodhound. No computer on Earth could outsniff him. I also got a quote from the roommate. "They don't care who gets hurt." Julia said it days before she died. "Good," Wolfe said. "We're closing in." "You think this is corporate sabotage?" "No." Wolfe turned to face me, wiping his hands on a towel. "I think it's worse. It's systemic rot." That evening, Diana Kent returned. Her coat was off before she sat down. Maybe trust, maybe habit. Wolfe didn't waste time. "Miss Kent, your sister's journal is missing. A man in a grey sedan has been seeking it. He questioned her roommate and trailed Mr. Goodwin today. What do you know of this man?" Her reaction was pure ice. "I've seen him." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "When?" "After Julia's funeral. He approached me. Said he represented concerned shareholders. He asked if Julia had left anything behind that might be damaging to the company." "Did you tell the police?" "Number Y didn't think they'd believe me." I leaned forward. "Miss Kent, people are dying. If you know more, now's the time." She inhaled. "I didn't think it was connected until now. But 2 weeks before Julia died, she gave me a key. Told me not to use it unless something happened to her." Wolfe's eyebrow climbed a fraction. "What did it open?" "A safety deposit box, but I haven't checked it." "I was, afraid." Wolfe stood, a rare event. "Miss Kent, I advise you to retrieve the contents. Immediately. And do not open it until you are inside this office with Mr. Goodwin present." She nodded. An hour later, I escorted her to the bank. The box contained a sealed manila envelope and a flash drive. She didn't ask questions. I didn't offer comfort. Back in Wolfe's office, under the warm lamplight, she opened it. Inside, printouts, dozens of pages, emails between Julia and Maya, internal memos, one from a G. Navarro Legal Affairs that said, "Proceed with submission." Delay on toxicity findings irrelevant. Marketing wants early rollout. Wolfe's face darkened. "These are records of criminal negligence," he said. "And that flash drive?" I asked. Wolfe plugged it into the desk laptop. Up popped lab results, charts, timestamps, internal emails, all pointing to a cancer treatment trial called Virexa, halted after several patient deaths, then mysteriously resumed. "Archie," Wolfe said, "tomorrow you will visit G. Navarro." "And say what?" "That his sins are catching up." "That and that he may wish to begin preparing his alibi. Chapter 4. The Legal Shield. By 10 o'clock the next morning, I was standing in the atrium of Biocor's corporate headquarters, glass, chrome, and just enough silence to make a man self-conscious about the sound of his own shoes. The receptionist had a smile that looked leased, not owned. When I asked for Gavin Navarro, head of legal affairs, she took one look at my card and tried to pretend she hadn't seen it. Mr. Navarro doesn't take unscheduled appointments. Sure he does, I said, stepping aside to let a VP-looking type breeze by. You just haven't had the pleasure of watching him get confronted with felonies before lunch. Her eyes flicked, uncertain. I could see the cracks in her poise, so I leaned in. Tell him it's about Virexa and Julia Kent. She picked up the phone with the urgency of someone holding a hand grenade. 30 seconds later, I was buzzed through and led to a corner office with a view that probably cost more per square foot than my entire wardrobe. Navarro stood when I entered, which surprised me. Mid-40s, slick hair, pinstripe suit that didn't scream power so much as whisper expensive. His handshake was firm and brief, like a lawyer who knew the limits of physical contact. Mr. Goodwin, quite a bold move. I specialize in those. He gestured to the chair. I took it. You're here about Julia Kent, he said. Tragic business, but I fail to see how that concerns me. It concerns you because she died shortly after whistleblowing internal documents that bear your name, specifically a memo directing the early release of a cancer drug trial despite known toxicity issues. His jaw didn't tighten, his hands didn't twitch, but his pupils narrowed like a man adjusting to a sudden, inconvenient light. Those memos were internal deliberations, standard risk assessment, nothing criminal. Then why are 2 people dead and a third being followed by a man in a grey sedan? Are you implying I'm involved in murder? I'm not implying anything. I'm collecting facts. And the facts are getting inconvenient for you. Navarro stood, walked to the window, and clasped his hands behind his back. Miss Kent's death was ruled accidental. Dr. Meyer's situation is unfortunate. But you're reaching. Then maybe the police should reach too. I've got a manila folder full of confidential emails and trial results that say otherwise. He turned. You should be very careful, Mr. Goodwin. Companies like Biocor don't appreciate their name being dragged through the mud, especially not by a hired errand boy. Funny thing, I said, standing. That errand boy works for a man who's solved more cases than your legal team's shredded documents, and we don't rattle easy. As I left, his voice followed me, cool and flat. If you press this, someone will get hurt. I didn't answer, but it was already too late for that. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the dining room, halfway through a plate of braised duck and wild rice. I gave him the rundown while trying not to drool. He didn't deny writing the memo, I said. Just said it was deliberation. Phooey, that's lawyer speak for guilty conscience. He also said we should be careful. Wolfe finished chewing, wiped his mouth and said, You've been careful enough. Now it's my turn. That meant the gears were grinding in the great man's brain, and soon something would come out, usually brilliant, always inconvenient. Saul called, Wolfe said. The license plate NYH5023 belongs to a private security firm, Shield Tac Global, employed by Biocor. That slid in like a jigsaw piece. So Biocor's got their own muscle. Yes, and they've been watching Diana Kent. My coffee went cold. Why would they follow her? I asked. Because she may still have something Julia hid. Or they believe she knows more than she does. She does know more than she's told us. Yes, but not enough to be dangerous yet. That's why they haven't tried to silence her, only track her. I paced the room. Navarro's playing defense. Meyer was a liability, so they shut him up. Julia tried to blow the whistle. They made it look like an accident. Now they're watching Diana for loose ends. Wolfe nodded. And we hold the thread they fear most. The files? No, he said. The truth. At 4 p.m., Diana returned, this time with circles under her eyes and a paper bag in her hand. They came to my apartment, she said as soon as she entered, searched it, claimed they were from Biocor's compliance division, had badges, said they were looking for confidential property. Wolfe didn't blink. Did they take anything? Number Y had everything here with you. Good. She sat, and Wolfe leaned forward, more motion than usual, which meant the stakes had moved. Miss Kent, we believe the man in the grey sedan works for a firm contracted by Biocor. They are attempting to cover their tracks. That includes watching you, possibly intimidating you. Her knuckles whitened. Now, Wolfe continued, did your sister mention anyone else involved? A partner, a lab tech, even a janitor with sticky fingers? She shook her head slowly. Number, just Dr. Meyer. Then he was the last barrier. With him gone, Navarro assumed the trail ended. But it didn't, I added, because she left the files, and now we've got them. I want justice, Diana said. Wolfe studied her. Justice is subjective, but consequences are not. He rang the bell. Fritz entered. Tea, Wolfe said, and contact Lon Cohen. He'll want a byline for the year. Lon was our press contact over at the Gazette. Wolfe rarely played the media card, but when he did, it meant the gloves were off. What are you planning? Diana asked. Wolfe leaned back. I intend to expose them. That night, I met with Saul in the back of a coffee shop near Astoria. He had a file thick enough to give your wrist a sprain. Navarro's clean on paper, he said. But I found something. He slid a photo across the table, Navarro and a woman, arms around each other, smiling for the camera. I raised an eyebrow. Who's she? Medical consultant, former FDA. She greenlit the early Varexa trial before resigning, now on Biocor's advisory board. Name? Catherine Brooke. Time to pay her a visit. Saul smiled. Already booked you an appointment. She thinks you're a reporter. Perfect. He handed me a burner phone. And Archie, be careful, they're circling. As I stepped out into the cold night, a thought snapped into place. Navarro wasn't the brains, he was the cleanup. The brains? That might just be someone higher. Someone still in the shadows. And we were about to turn on the lights. Chapter 5. The Woman on the Board. I've pretended to be a lot of things in my time. Plumber, divorce attorney, census worker. But this was the first time I'd gone undercover as an investigative health reporter from Medline Weekly. The trick to a good lie is giving it the ring of boredom. No one suspects the guy carrying a notepad full of jargon. Dr. Catherine Brooke's office was on the 15th floor of a glass-paneled research tower downtown, tucked between biotech startups and overpriced smoothie bars. She kept it minimalist. Leather chair, brushed metal desk, one wall of awards, the other a window into Manhattan's smoggy skyline. She looked up from her tablet as I entered, mid-50s, well-preserved platinum hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, and a voice like cooled steel. Mr. Goodwin? That's me, I said, flashing the fake credentials Saul had cooked up. I appreciate you taking the time. This story on Varexa is getting a lot of traction. She didn't smile. I was told you wanted background on fast-track approvals. Exactly, particularly when toxicity reports raise flags. I understand you were involved in the initial green light for Varexa's Phase 2 trials. She set down the tablet. I reviewed the early data. Yes, the compound showed promise. Elevated liver enzymes were flagged, but the risk-benefit ratio was considered acceptable. In oncology, that's not uncommon. Even if patient fatalities emerge later, her jaw tightened just enough to make me watch for it. Post-trial analysis is always evolving. You can't link every adverse event directly to a compound. Unless someone inside the company tried to do exactly that and died shortly after. She leaned back, measuring me. This isn't about reporting, is it? Not entirely. She exhaled through her nose, folded her arms. I knew Julia Kent. Smart girl. Too smart. She started asking the wrong questions, then went quiet. When I asked Navarro what happened, he said she was unstable. Did you believe him? I did then. I don't anymore. Why not? Because Maya called me a week before he died, said he had regrets, said there were memos circulating, illegal ones. Then he hung up. Bingo. And you didn't go to the authorities? I didn't know what to give them. I wasn't about to stake my career on vague guilt and office gossip. Now 2 people are dead, I said, and a third, Diana Kent, is being followed. Don't you think it's time to talk? She hesitated, then walked to a filing cabinet, unlocked it, and pulled out a single folder. This was slid under my office door a month ago. No note, no fingerprints, just this. Inside were 3 pages, copies of the same memo Julia had left in her deposit box. Navarro's email was front and center. She wanted someone to have this, Dr. Brooks said quietly. Then it's time someone listened. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was engaged in his pre-lunch ritual, glaring at the world from behind a slice of cornbread and a small bowl of black bean soup. I gave him the details. He didn't look up until I said the name Catherine Brooke. She's a survivor, Wolfe muttered. Moved from regulation to industry without losing her moral ambiguity. She's scared. She should be. I handed him the folder. He studied it, then looked at me with something approaching satisfaction. This, Archie, is what we needed. Confirmation from a third party. Someone still within the system. This is no longer a matter of corporate misjudgment. It's criminal enterprise. Then what's our next move? We strike. Strike? He pointed a pudgy finger at the phone. Call Lon Cohen. Tell him I have a story. Then ring Diana Kent. She must be present. I take it the final act is coming. Soon, Wolfe said, eyes narrowing. Very soon. By late afternoon, the brownstone had become a pressure cooker. Diana Kent arrived first, nervous but resolute. Saul showed next, confirming that Shield Tac Global had scrubbed their online presence, standard practice for firms paid to disappear problems. Lon Cohen came in chewing gum and smelling like press ink, thrilled at the scoop Wolfe had promised. Then the final guest walked through the door, Gavin Navarro. I came because you left a message saying Biocor was being slandered, he said, adjusting his cufflinks. This had better be worth my time. Oh, Wolfe said, with a smile like a creaking hinge. I assure you it is. He waited until everyone had settled in the office. The room was warm, full of cigar smoke and tension. Fritz had even brought out the good scotch, though Wolfe wouldn't touch it before dinner. Wolfe leaned forward in his chair, fingertips pressed together. We now understand that Julia Kent discovered a series of irregularities in the Virexa trial program. Specifically, data showing toxicity rates were suppressed before submission to the FDA. She informed her supervisor, Dr. Samuel Meyer, and made a copy of the internal memos involved. Rather than reporting it to authorities, she confided in her sister and, curiously, in Dr. Catherine Brooke. Brooke looked startled but didn't object. Subsequently, Wolfe continued, Julia Kent died in what was ruled an accidental fall. Dr. Meyer was later shot, execution style, with no signs of struggle. Navarro's jaw was rigid. That's speculation. No, Mr. Navarro, it's reconstruction, based on documents your name is attached to, emails from your own account, ordering that toxicity results be deemed irrelevant to marketing goals. I won't respond to forged material. Oh, please, Wolfe snorted. Your arrogance is only surpassed by your recklessness. You had access to internal risk reports, pressured Meyer into silence, and used shield-tack operatives to follow Diana Kent, likely in search of the remaining copies of the data. Lon Cohen, scribbling furiously, looked like he'd just struck oil. Worse, Wolfe went on, you failed to consider that Julia left her trail deliberately. You believed the deaths of a whistleblower and her frightened superior would eliminate the risk. Instead, you handed us motive, means, and now confirmation. Navarro stood. You can't prove... I don't need to, Wolfe cut in. The press will publish this within the hour. I've already delivered copies to the Attorney General's office. The game is over. Navarro glanced at the others, saw no sympathy, and stormed out. As the door closed, Diana exhaled. It was shaky, heavy. Is that it? She asked. Wolfe leaned back. Yes, Miss Kent. Justice. In the form it most often takes, exposure. That night, after Lon filed his piece and the brownstone was finally quiet, I poured 2 bourbons and handed Wolfe his, knowing he wouldn't drink it, but appreciating the ceremony. You think they'll indict? I asked. They'll have to, Wolfe said, staring out the window. And shield-tack? Will vanish like smoke, that's their specialty. I raised my glass. To Julia Kent. Wolfe nodded. To truth, however belated. Chapter 6. Pressure points. The day after Wolfe blew the lid off Biocor's toxic secrets, the phones rang like fire alarms, reporters, lawyers, and one confused bakery looking for Mr. Wolfe. I told them we didn't do croissants. The Gazette ran Lon Cohen's story above the fold. Big pharma, big cover-up, 2 dead, 1 exposed. Navarro's name was front and center. By mid-afternoon, the district attorney's office announced an inquiry. Saul reported shield-tack had closed its Manhattan field office overnight and gone digital ghost. And Wolfe sat in his chair with the satisfied smugness of a man who'd just fertilized orchids with the ashes of his enemies. I trust we can now turn to more civil matters, he said, sipping beer and waving off a call from the Times. But of course, peace was not in the forecast. At 5:32 p.m., the bell rang. I opened the front door expecting another reporter. Instead, I got a man built like a vending machine in an expensive coat. Clean shave, cold eyes, and a voice that said, I don't ask twice. I need to speak to Mr. Wolfe, he said. I didn't budge. Name? Call me Denton, he knows why I'm here. Wolfe doesn't usually know anyone with a neck thicker than their IQ, but I buzzed him anyway. Fritz was upstairs and it didn't seem polite to make the guy eat the doorknob. Wolfe allowed him in. Barely. Denton walked into the office, didn't sit, didn't blink. You've made problems for people who don't like problems. Wolfe eyed him. Are you one of them? I'm a messenger. They want to know what else you have. Who are they? Denton smiled like a crocodile. You don't want to find out. I moved to the edge of the desk. That a threat, pal? It's a suggestion. Then suggest your way out the door. Wolfe didn't rise. He didn't need to. Tell your employers, he said, that any interference from them will be met with full disclosure to federal regulators, news outlets, and one particularly zealous senator who's been trying to make a name for himself with pharmaceutical reform. Denton didn't flinch, just nodded, turned, and left. When the door shut, Wolfe finally exhaled. That, he said, what it was pressure. No kidding, I muttered. You think they'll try again? Not with force, Wolfe said. They're smart enough to know violence draws light. But subversion, sabotage, that is their language. The next morning proved him right. At 9:45 a.m., Diana Kent called, panic in her voice. They broke into my apartment, she said, but the place is torn apart. Nothing taken, but everything's been rifled through. Wolfe didn't hesitate. Come here. Now. She arrived shaken but composed. A line of red on her palm suggested she'd caught herself on something sharp while trying to clean up. "I didn't even hear them come in," she said. "I went out to get coffee, 20 minutes. When I came back, the place looked like a tornado hit it." I offered her tea, which she didn't touch. "They're not just trying to scare you," I said. "They think you're hiding something." "I gave you everything Julia left." "That we know of," Wolfe said. She looked up, startled. "You think I'm lying? I think you're trying to be brave, and brave people make bad liars." She hesitated, then pulled something from her bag. A flash drive, identical to the one from the safety deposit box. "Julia gave me this separately," she said. "Said it was encrypted. She didn't want to store it with the rest." Wolfe took it delicately, like it might explode. "Archie," he said, "run this to Saul. Tell him to crack it, discreetly." "You got it." I took the flash drive straight to Saul's place in Queens, where he operated out of an apartment that doubled as a computer lab and tripled as a chaos exhibit. "You sure you want what's on here?" he asked, booting up his laptop. "Unless it's Julia Kent's Spotify playlist, yeah." He ran a decryption program, fingers moving fast. 10 minutes later, the screen filled with spreadsheets, lab reports, and something new, patient interviews. One in particular caught my eye, a transcript. Interviewer: "Have you experienced any side effects from the medication?" Patient number 113: "The pain is worse now. My liver numbers are high. They told me not to stop though. They said I was exaggerating." Interviewer: "Who told you that?" Patient number 113. Doctor: "Navarro and some woman from legal. They said quitting would void my insurance." I felt my jaw clench. "Print it all," I told Saul, "and keep the original locked down." When I returned, Wolfe was waiting with Inspector Kramer. The good inspector looked like a man who'd just swallowed a cactus. "I'm not here to kiss your ring," he growled. Wolfe gestured magnanimously. "Then don't bow." "I'm here because a break-in was reported, and because 3 of your statements now match intel we've received from a whistleblower in the FDA." "Then you're finally catching up." Kramer ignored him and turned to me. "You find anything?" I handed him the transcript. "Direct patient testimony, confirmed suppression of symptoms, possibly coercion." Kramer scanned it. His mouth twitched. "This is enough for a search warrant." Wolfe steepled his fingers. "Do use it wisely, Inspector, before more people vanish." At 8 o'clock that night, we got word. Navarro had been arrested. Charges included fraud, obstruction, and conspiracy to commit medical negligence. Shield Tax New Jersey HQ was also raided, though predictably, most of the records were gone. Still, it was a win. I brought Wolfe a drink. "You think they'll flip him?" I asked. "Eventually. Men like Navarro have no appetite for prison. They prefer velvet ropes to iron bars." "And Diana?" Wolfe looked to the corner where she sat reading quietly. The relief on her face was cautious, like a storm survivor staring at blue sky and wondering if it'll last. "She'll heal," he said. "But slowly." "And Julia?" "She did what few dare. She told the truth before it became fashionable." I raised my glass again. "To pressure points." Wolfe didn't smile, but his eyes softened. "To those who hold firm under them." Chapter 7. The Last Orchid. The morning after Navarro's arrest, you'd think Wolfe might have treated himself to a slow breakfast or a double helping of cornbread. Instead, he was up early, by Wolfe standards, which means just before 10, and already in the plant room, standing over a wilted Miltonia orchid like it had insulted his mother. He didn't speak when I entered, just nudged the clay pot slightly and sighed. "That one?" I asked. "Thought it was your prize winner." "It was," he muttered. "But it bloomed early, off schedule. There's something wrong with the root system, something hidden." He turned and gave me the look that meant he wasn't just talking about the orchid. "You found something?" I said. He nodded toward his desk. "Mail from Dr. Catherine Brooke." I crossed the room and picked up the envelope, unmarked, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside were two items, a single-page letter and a black-and-white photograph. The letter was brief. "Mr. Wolfe. For what it's worth, I tried to stop it years ago, but we don't always choose the fight. We're chosen by it. I think you'll understand. C. Brooke." The photo was older, creased at the corners, a group of lab technicians in white coats standing in front of what looked like an early-stage biocore facility. Julia Kent was in the center, smiling wide. But that wasn't what made Wolfe set down his orchid shears and walk into the office like gravity had shifted. In the back row of the photo stood another man. Younger, clean-shaven, sharp eyes behind thick glasses. Wolfe tapped the image. "Do you recognize him?" I squinted. "That's Navarro, isn't it?" "No," Wolfe said quietly. "That is Paul Reardon." "Okay. Who's Paul Reardon?" He sat heavily. Paul Reardon was the founder of Biocore's predecessor, a brilliant toxicologist. Publicly, he died of heart failure 15 years ago. I blinked. "You're saying that man didn't die?" "I'm saying he changed his name." Wolfe opened a drawer and pulled out a dusty red file folder labeled Reardon, St. Louis Inquiry. He slid it across the desk. 8 years ago, I was asked to consult, off the record, on a case involving research fraud. It never made the news. The principal suspect vanished. His methods were ruthless, his data falsified, and 3 trial participants died. The culprit, Paul Reardon, and now he's resurfaced as Gavin Navarro? Wolfe nodded. A new identity, new credentials, but the same patterns, the same language in his memos. He didn't just continue his work, he escalated it. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I had no proof, only suspicion. Until now." I sat back, letting it hit me. This wasn't just a cover-up. This was a resurrection. So he faked his death, reinvented himself, and built a company to keep doing the exact same thing that forced him underground. "Yes," Wolfe said grimly. "And it cost Julia Kent her life." There was a pause, a heavy one. Then the phone rang. I answered, expecting a reporter or the DA's office. Instead, it was Diana Kent. "Archie," she said, her voice trembling. "He's gone?" "Who?" "Navarro," he made bail. "They released him last night. I just heard it from a friend in the AG's office. They didn't even notify me." My stomach dropped. "We'll handle it," I said. I hung up and looked at Wolfe. "He's on the move." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "And desperate men make mistakes." 2 hours later, Saul called from a train station outside Trenton. "I've got him," he said. "Navarro's trying to leave the state. Fake ID, light luggage. But here's the twist. He's not alone." "Who's with him?" "Catherine Brooke." I blinked. "Come again?" She picked him up from the courthouse. They're using a private shuttle heading toward a private airstrip in northern Jersey. I covered the receiver. "Wolfe, they're running together." Wolfe's expression didn't change. "She's aiding him?" "Or she's baiting him." I went back to Saul. "Tail him, but don't engage. We'll meet you there." Wolfe stood, another miracle, and headed to the coat rack. "You're coming?" I asked. He nodded once. "This time I want to look him in the eyes." We reached the airstrip just as the sun began to dip behind a sheet of grey clouds. Saul flagged us from the side of a hangar where the shuttle van was parked. Navarro and Brooke stood a few feet from a twin-engine jet, deep in conversation. Wolfe stepped forward, his cane tapping with slow, deliberate weight. Navarro saw him and froze. Brooke turned, startled, but not afraid. "You're too late," Navarro said. "Flight's already scheduled. You have no jurisdiction." "I don't need jurisdiction," Wolfe said, calmly. "I need only the truth." Brooke stepped forward. He threatened me, Wolfe. Said if I didn't help him vanish, he'd release footage claiming I doctored the trial data. Wolfe nodded. And did you? Number? But truth rarely stops men like him. Navarro laughed. You're wasting your breath. Hardly, Wolfe replied. Because we've informed the FAA, the flight is grounded, federal agents are en route, and your new identity won't hold past the next sunrise. Navarro moved fast. Too fast. He pulled something from his coat, a syringe, capped but unmistakable. Back off, he shouted, jabbing it toward Brooke. But Wolfe didn't flinch. Cowardice, he said, is always louder than guilt. Saul moved like lightning, had the syringe out of Navarro's hand and the man on the ground before I even reached them. Brooke staggered backward, breath shallow. It was over. Later that night, back at the brownstone, Wolfe returned to his orchids. The wilted Miltonia had been pruned, its roots exposed, trimmed, and repotted. You saved it? I asked. He glanced over his glasses. I gave it a chance. As we did with Diana Kent, Navarro. In custody, the charges will multiply. And Brooke? She'll testify. That's penance enough. We sat in the office, surrounded by the scent of orchids and the faint sound of rain. You ever wonder, I asked, why people like Julia take the risk? Wolfe looked up. Because some roots grow crooked, and someone must notice before they poison the soil. Chapter 8, The Midnight Cipher. Rain slicked the streets of Manhattan in long silver streaks. From the brownstone's windows, the world looked like it was being washed of its sins, or at least having them rearranged. Wolfe sat behind his desk, rotund and motionless, a monument to certainty. I was across from him, flipping through the morning papers, all of which now agreed. Gavin Navarro, alias Paul Reardon, was finished. Federal custody, charges spanning 2 states, conspiracy, fraud, obstruction, and, pending autopsy reviews, murder. It should have felt final, but something still nagged at me. Wolfe, I said, there's one thing we never figured out. He looked up from his copy of Foreign Orchids Monthly. Only one. The original cipher Julia sent to Diana, those numbers, they led us to the trial batches, sure. But why send that specifically? Why not just mail the memos? Wolfe didn't answer right away. Instead, he rose, slowly, and walked to the bookshelf. He pulled down a slim black volume titled Pharmaceutical Lot Tracking and Inventory Codes. Leave it to Wolfe to keep bedtime reading that could double as chemical warfare. He laid it on the desk, flipped to a tabbed page, and pointed. The cipher wasn't just about identification, he said. It was a timeline. I leaned in. The numbers, 74, 16, 33, 88, 45, 21, 09, 57, each correlated to a production lot Julia had worked on, but there was more. Arranged chronologically, they showed a progression, each one with a slightly higher toxicity warning, increasingly urgent notes in the footers. Until the last, Lot 57 had no report filed at all. Wolfe tapped the blank line in the database. Lot 57 was never logged. It vanished, which means it was either destroyed or moved off the record. My brain clicked. That's what she wanted to prove, I said. Not just what was done, but what they were still doing. Lot 57 wasn't a dead project, it was the current one. Yes, Wolfe said, and until last night we had no evidence it existed. He reached into his drawer and pulled out an envelope, sealed and thick. This arrived by courier this morning, from Dr. Brooke. Inside were 4 photographs, taken inside a cold storage warehouse. One crate bore the label Virexa Lot 57. Next to it, a shipping manifest with a delivery address in Sao Paulo. They were preparing to launch outside FDA jurisdiction, Wolfe said. Latin America. No oversight. No whistleblowers. She gave us the final nail, I said. No, Wolfe corrected. Julia gave it. Catherine merely delivered it. The phone rang. Fritz answered, then called up. Miss Kent is here, sir. Diana entered a moment later, umbrella dripping, raincoat buttoned all the way up. She looked calmer now, resigned, but there was something else in her, steel maybe. I saw the news, she said. Is it really over? Wolfe gestured for her to sit. Almost. He opened a folder and began. Miss Kent, your sister knew she was being watched. She had access to data that, if leaked, would have destroyed the company. But she also knew that data alone wasn't enough. It could be dismissed as incomplete, as bitter speculation from a disgruntled employee. So she sent the cipher, Diana said softly. Yes, a puzzle, but a precise one. A way to map the progression of danger without revealing it directly. That way, if intercepted, it wouldn't incriminate her or expose you. It bought her time. Sadly, not enough. Diana's hands curled slightly in her lap. She died because she trusted the system. No, Wolfe said. She died because the system trusted the wrong people. But you, Miss Kent, honored her gamble. You came to me. I could see her eyes start to shine. She blinked them clear. Will the victims' families be told? Wolfe nodded. The DA has opened a separate inquiry into patient deaths linked to the trial. There will be names, charges, compensation, perhaps? Justice, I said, in the only form it ever really shows up. Slow, partial, but real. Wolfe grunted, which was his version of a standing ovation. She stood. Thank you both. Wolfe inclined his head. Your sister was brave, so were you. After she left, the house fell quiet. I poured myself a cup of Fritz's stronger-than-legal coffee and leaned back. Well, I said, we've taken down a corporation, exposed a fugitive scientist, and protected a civilian. Not a bad week. Wolfe just lifted one brow. Phui, it was adequate, I laughed. You ever satisfied? He reached over and pulled a fresh orchid cutting from a nearby tray. Only in rare bloom cycles. That night I stepped out for air. The rain had stopped, but the street still glistened like polished coal. I walked to the corner and back, coat collar turned up, watching lights blink on in apartment windows like clues in some cosmic case. Julia Kent had known she wouldn't survive this. That's why she left behind not just evidence, but a breadcrumb trail, a cipher meant for the one person she trusted to find someone who could understand it. It brought her sister to our door. It brought justice to a place no longer used to seeing it, and it reminded me, yet again, that the sharpest crimes aren't always loud. Sometimes they arrive on letterhead, sometimes they wear lab coats, and sometimes they go quiet only when a genius in slippers decides enough is enough.